Hey, you're listening to Don't Lie to Your Life Coach podcast with Kim Arrington. I'm Kim Arrington. I'm a life coach, a weight loss coach, an author, and a badass passionate about helping you connect back to your most authentic self. Join me here each week so I can coach you on how to think all those juicy thoughts that get you feeling your absolute best and taking some big ass action. Coaching has changed my life, and it can change your life too. I'm here to give you real life solutions to create a life you'll love. Because the truth is, boo, you ain't just got problems, you got options. Y'all, I always, hey, I always go back and forth about, I usually record 2 podcasts in a day and which one I want to do. But can I first say, I have been working through half-life weight loss. It is almost here. It's almost here. But I need to apologize to you all for something. My wonderful, amazing podcast listeners, as I was working through the videos of Half-Life, I was like, man, I say okay a lot. Okay, and my trademark, that's what I do when I'm thinking. That's what I do when I'm thinking. So my apologies. I have it in my ear now, and I'm working on that. What we're going to talk about today is something that I have noticed, and I noticed it with a lot of my friends who are mainly happen to be cisgender women. What we're going to talk about today is something that I see that is just bringing you all so much turmoil, and it is rejection. We're going to talk about that. I want to help you move through this. Now, I was inspired by this podcast with a couple of conversations with my girlfriends, but also I saw this amazing episode of Diary of a CEO. So I'll give you a little sneak peek into my life. As I was helping to produce the videos for Half-Life, it's going to be here. It's going to be here sooner than you think. As a matter of fact, by the time y'all get to the next episode, it'll be here. What I realized was I needed, my computer would sometimes go to sleep if I walked away to let a video upload. I started to pull up on YouTube, Diary of a CEO. And in Diary of a CEO, it would be like the perfect time I could listen, but it was like the perfect amount of time for my video to render or for me to upload a video to the course platform. But this particular episode 154, the world's leading therapist, 3 steps to remove your negative thoughts, Marisa Peer, was amazing. And it got me perfectly thinking about how to talk to you all about rejection and how to get over rejection, because I'm going to give you the whole podcast right now. You can turn it off after I say this. Rejection is never an outside job. Rejection is always an inside job, meaning that you're going to do the work to learn to radically accept yourself. And when rejection comes, you kind of got a coating that it can't stick to you. I'm not going to say the cursed coating that y'all don't like anymore. So nothing sticks to you. So I want to set the stage for us to talk about that and how we first begin feeling rejected, what we can do now. And I'm going to put in the show notes, the podcast show notes about this episode. You're going to hear me echo back and forth a lot of what I heard in the episode, because I just had never heard it said so wonderfully. But I am going to start off with a quote by James Clear. And James Clear is the author of Atomic Habits, and it's an amazing book. So this is what James Clear says. On any given day, you may struggle with habits because you're too busy or too tired or too overwhelmed or hundreds of other reasons. Over the long run, the real reason you fail to stick with habits is that your self-image gets in the way. This is why You can't get too attached to one version of your identity. How does that apply to rejection? If you see yourself as constantly on the receiving end of rejection, that means your identity, what you believe about yourself, is you get rejected. And so there are actually, events you can point to where you've been rejected, but also you have habits. You actually have created habits that you often think prevent you from being rejected, but they actually increase the chances you will be rejected. Now, I'm not going to go into a lot of that. That's its own podcast, right? The habits that lead to rejection. I will do a podcast on that for y'all at some point. I just want to open up the topic to kind of warm your brain up, and then we can go to some of those habits. So this is another quote from James Clear. Progress requires unlearning. Becoming the best version of you requires you to continuously edit your beliefs and to upgrade and expand your identity. You see, both of these quotes I chose about identity. That means if you feel like nothing ever works out for you, no one stays around, no one ever does what they say they're going to do, you are going to have to work very, very hard to look at why that thinking does not support any change. And that's what we do over here, Don't Lie to Your Life Coach, right? Y'all know Coach Kim be over here like, what you gonna do different to get some different outcomes? Because your thinking leads to how you behave, and how you behave shows up in what your life looks like. Let's talk about and get into some of that. I want to share this other story. So there is this older white lady at the Red and White that I shop at. Red and White is a little country store. They got the best meat. They got the best chicken salad. They got best hot dog, chili, and slaw. You see how I got more Southern when I was talking about that? But this woman, and I've been going there for years, even when I was a child. But this particular woman, when the wildfires were happening and we were getting all that smoke down here and it was hazy and you could feel it in the air, she's kind of one of those women who is like, I don't believe what they're saying about the wildfires, kind of conspiracy theorist. And, I kind of went a little back and forth with her, but I done learned sometimes you just got to let people be wherever they are. But I was talking to her the other day and I was like, I'm tired. I have been burning. If there's a candle, it don't even got a wick no more, right? And I can't keep that pace for long, but I'm willing to do it when it's something I really want, and I want y'all to have half-life. Y'all are going to have half-life. But this is something she said, and I immediately walked out the door and put it on my little document. In my Google Docs, I keep a document called Vocabulary and Methodology that's full of, it's like a brain dump of ideas, but occasionally I'll put someone else's stuff in there and I'll put, make sure I attribute it to them. She says, if you don't have a life, you don't get to go. And I was like, I was like, I love that. So you need to put that on a coffee mug. If you don't have a life, because I was telling her I was going. She said, well, if you don't have a life, you don't get to go. How does that work with rejection? How does that work with rejection? If you have been continually rejected, you make the circle around you smaller and smaller. You really try to keep out any possibility of being hurt, and it's not just hurt, it's unexpected hurt, right? And it's usually one or two events that happen that get you in an idea that you always get rejected. If you don't have a life, you don't get to go means that if you are rejected, the way to heal, it's like immersion therapy with flying. You don't get over your fear of flying by staying on the ground or driving everywhere. You go up in a plane and you get someone to explain to you what's happening. And as they explain to you what's happening, you get to ask all your questions. You get to say, should this be happening? Is this right? Is this? And eventually, some people, it takes them just going up once and they can get on a plane. Some people, it takes them going up and the fear is brought down a little bit, and then they keep going, they fly somewhere else and it's brought down and they're scared and all that. Here's the thing, and I have sat by many as a life coach, y'all, I've sat by many scared flyers, and at one point when I was applying a lot, it was unfamiliar, it was scary to me. Here's my point. Here's my point. If you feel like people have disappointed you, they haven't shown up for you, they haven't said and done what you wanted them to do, and you have created your life smaller so you don't really have a life and you don't really go because of that, you're going to have to do this. I'm actually going to send this podcast episode to somebody who I think needs to hear this. And the ways this is the reason why I ain't giving y'all the habits today. The ways that you are living in kind of a rejected based living is that you don't open up your circle. I'll give you an example. I was in Martha's Vineyard and I met this amazing woman from DC. Now, I'm almost 47 years old. I've got tons of friends. Sorry, but I brag about that because my friends are family to me, right? She and I just clicked. And I was just so grateful for being able to meet someone. We had things that were similar, we had differences. We kind of were like vacation besties. And we've talked some since we've left Martha's Vineyard. And I was like, see, if I was back in the day where I felt, and I'm gonna be honest with y'all, I never really, rejection really wasn't completely my thing. It was more abandonment. And I think abandonment can fuel a rejection wound. I don't think that rejection and abandonment, there's a nuance there. Okay. Abandonment to me is the larger body of water, and rejection helps feed into abandonment. I'm trying to think of my mother was a 5th grade social studies teacher, and I can't think source. I don't know what is the thing that feeds into the water. I'm not going to look it up. Y'all are yelling it. Y'all don't remember that. So I think abandonment is the bigger thing, and rejection can feed into that. Here's the thing. I'm open. I pride myself in being open. I have been hurt. I have been devastated, but I've kind of dusted myself off and I tried again with your Leah reference. Okay. So that's what I want to talk about in this episode. Some of how that rejection identity gets lodged in your subconscious. And you remember your subconscious is like this recorder that's always recording every experience, everything, and it's making these assumptions to keep you safe. But the truth is, and here's a wonderful podcast episode that would be a companion to this, you have a happiness ceiling. To feel as happy as you can, you are going to come up against some fear and anxiety to go to your next level, because if you stay at the level you're at, that's the doom, that's the gloom, that's the feeling of my life doesn't mean this or that. So you are going to come up against some of your demons. Is that what y'all calling them? Is demons the new word? Okay. So this is some of the stuff that Marisa Peer talked about in this episode. So much of our rejection is set for us when we have the filter of a child. She used that term, the filter of a child, which basically means that even as adults, we are carrying around stories. Steve Bartlett said stubborn stories, and I love that. I wrote it down, stubborn stories. We're carrying around these stubborn stories that we have interpreted a certain way, but we're not being honest and saying, oh, well, I interpreted that story when I was 6 or 5 or 13. Would you ask a 5-year-old to take your laundry to the cleaners? Would you ask a 7-year-old to go to the grocery store, drive your car to the grocery store? You're on a first date. Would you want your 15-year-old self to show up for that first date? But that's what happens. If you're having a story of I always am rejected, I am not enough, I am not worthy, people don't see about me, that is often set in those early ages, and it could be 0 to 5 months. It's set around your attachment style. You all know no one does attachment style better to me. The Personal Development School, I will link it. Here's the thing. Part of you getting better is the awareness that you are looking through the lens of your child self. It happened to me the other day. I'm not going to go exactly into what happened, but what I decided to do is when it happened to me, I had this scary experience. I felt it in my body. I felt tense. I felt like I'm going to walk in and this is going to remind me of this. And what I did is I took the story and I said, well, what's the first story this reminds me of? Oh, well, this reminds me when I dated this guy and I walked in and then I went further. But then where does it take me? Then I was like, oh, well, it reminds me of when I was dating this guy and he decided to date my friend. And then it reminds me of being in first or second grade and I liked a boy and he liked three girls. Oh, and then it reminds me of, not feeling chosen by my dad. Oh, and I just kept going back and back. And then I talked back. I was like, well, this isn't the same. Those events aren't connected. This is not the same situation. You didn't have the powerlessness. I was like, I gave myself the time to process it through. And I checked with myself, are you done? And I was like, yeah, like I feel back to me. And that was a beautiful healing moment for me to understand that this event that not only was I looking at through it from the filter of a child, the lens of a child, I was looking at it through several different filters and several different lenses of a child. So I got to ask you, if you were to think about, I don't want you to think about your most, difficult experience, something a little bit that you could think about that really bothers you. Is it your 20-year-old self showing up? Because a 20-year-old is still a child. It's a child plus a couple of years. Okay, young adult, okay, y'all. Is it your 6-year-old self who felt like no one liked you showing up? And not only who's showing up, but how are they continuing to show up in your relationships with yourself and others that are not helpful? Stubborn stories stick with us. Say that 10 times fast. Here's something else Marisa Peer said. And by the way, her last name is spelled Peer. I just thought that was so interesting because she's this therapist and she works with all these people and her last name is Peer, like I'm a peer to you. And it was just so lovely and so casual the way she was talking. And I was just mesmerized. I am going to read her book shout out. I'm going to listen to her book. Her book is called, listen to the title, Tell Yourself a Better Lie. Use the power of rapid transformational therapy to edit your story and rewrite your life. One of the things she talks about is when you have these stories, when I was experiencing this thing, you have images that go along with it. You know why? Because your subconscious, your brain, that's your language of your brain. It's images. It's pictures. It's words, but it's not all language. Pictures are language to your brain. So she was like, what happens when you alter that picture? And that's what I did in that moment. I literally was seeing that when I walked in and saw, this thing, I saw the picture change as I was talking it through with myself. So even though the language of your subconscious is images, the language of your consciousness, your subconscious is, you don't know it's going on and it's happening and you kind of like aren't sure, but your conscious is, no, I'm conscious of what's going on and I want to speak back to it. It's what I teach my private clients. Like, can you speak back to that story? Can you do that? I want you next time something really bothers you, if you go back to this kind of mid-range experience I told you, what are the pictures you see? And what does it do when you alter the pictures? Like, I'll give you an example. This is very relatable. Your kid's bus is late. Your kid's bus is late. What kind of images come up in your brain about what could have happened? You see a bus accident. You see them being left at school and their phone is dead and they can't get in contact with you and the office is closed. You see like all these things that could be, or they were walking and something happened to them. You are seeing pictures. So sometimes to alter or to affect what's happening, the first thing you need to do is work with changing the pictures. This happened to me the other day with my kid on the bus, and I was like, He just didn't call. That's what it is. And he probably got picked up. And it's been a busy day. And as he and my husband pulled up, now if my intuition had been like, and I'm so connected to my stepson, if my intuition had said danger, then I would have immediately called. What you want to do is think different pictures, and it all worked out. So looking at that, Marisa Peer talks about looking at a scene and reframing it. So here's another really interesting thing she said. She talked about how when you're talking to people about faith, and you say to them, well, why do you believe that way? And they just say, I just do. That when something is absolute, it means you really believe it. But then when you start asking questions about it, that doubt comes in and you may not be believing it the same way. See, that is the process of a therapist or a coach coming in and poking some holes in that story and those images you have for you to begin reframing it and seeing it in a different way. And sometimes you need help to do that. A 12-step program, a interfaith group, a course, a book. When I was trying to change my feelings around money, I needed somebody to come in and change some of my thoughts and images I had in my head, which is, well, I've been irresponsible. And I was like, as a coach, I was like, nope, that's not enough. And I dug deep and I got some answers and reframed those stories. Marisa Peer talks about that you can go back and correct an incorrect thought. That's kind of what I've been saying. If you're looking at it through the filter of as a kid, it's probably incorrect. You didn't have all the resources to know what was going on. If you have these images, it's probably the scariest images because that's what your subconscious does to keep you safe. And you can go back with conscious awareness and say, I think I'm wrong about this. And what do I want to do now? Now, let me just warn you. Let me warn you. Going back to what James Clear said, you can't get too attached to one version of your identity. But here's the thing about the subconscious mind. When you then begin to poke holes into that identity, the subconscious mind's going to come out swinging with sometimes even more scary pictures and images for your head and even more scary thoughts. That's why it's so good to have a coach who can be like, that ain't real. That ain't true. That ain't, are you like a therapist? Like, are you sure? Like, and just asking you, well, why are you thinking this way? Is there another way you could think? That introduces doubt. When you introduce doubt, you can change. It's just like with weight loss. When I began introducing doubt in that overeating is really great for you, like that it feels like it actually works to help you with your emotions, that it actually gives you some access to protect yourself, and I start poking holes in that, and you start having that doubt, that is when your identity can change. That's it. That's when the change is possible. I love this. I love this. I love this. Boy, I tell you what, Marisa, I'm part of your fan club. Anything you acquire, you can release. Anything that's been given to you, you can release. In my weight loss program, there's a whole video module on how to change your weight loss story. And, I did not see Marisa Peer's Diary of a CEO before I wrote this, but I just knew this. Like, your weight loss story has been given to you by many of your primary caregivers. So because it didn't originate with you and you acquired it, that means you can absolutely change it. Absolutely change it. How? Well, a lot of times I'll say very directly to myself, is this even real? Like literally as a coach, I'll say for instance, a friend doesn't call me back and I'm like, man, they're really thinking about what I said in the last conversation and they're really bothered by it. And then I'll interrupt my virtual reality. Did y'all see Jamiroquai dancing on the little treadmills he had? Anyway, I'll be like, is that even real? Like, what are some other possibilities? And this is something I teach to my clients, opposing thoughts. Like, can you come up with 3 other things it could be? Because that begins to introduce doubt in, and it also allows you to go back and correct a potentially incorrect thought. And it also means that if you acquired it, you can release it. It may not be true. Like, I'm probably thinking of something that happened 6 years ago when someone said to me and I didn't know that they were angry. And they were like, well, I didn't like what you said. And my subconscious, in an attempt to keep me safe, went back to that to prepare me. That's what your subconscious wants to do. It wants to prepare you for the pain, even if the pain ain't even there. So you cannot believe everything you think. You cannot believe everything you think. That's the echo effect. You cannot believe everything you think because your thoughts are loaded. They are attached to acquired stories, old stories, stories that don't belong to you, and stories that just don't make sense anymore to keep around. I want to talk to you about the drama triangle. Someone who feels rejected may feel like the victim, and they would maybe think, poor me, I give up, I'm not okay, but everyone else is. So the victim, who will eventually be empowered to the creator, we'll talk about that. That is the empowerment triangle. So the victim may senses no inner safety and feels helpless, powerless, and oppressed, incapable and misunderstood. Secretly wants a rescuer to constantly validate their feelings, refuses solutions in the form of making decisions, solving their own problems, professional help, self-care, or change. You may feel a little bit of that martyr when it comes to the victim, right? And uses the past as a constant indicator of the world as an unsafe place. That's how a lot of people who are rejected begin to make rules. Well, I don't do this and I don't do that. I don't online date because I saw this, or I don't do, I don't give people second chances, because then on the empowerment triangle, the victim becomes the creator. And listen to the difference in this. The creator or the survivor, or thriver with problem solving, who is the former victim, right? They say, how can I get what I want in a healthy way? So poor me, I give up, I'm not okay, but everyone else is that victim. But then it goes to, how can I get what I want in a healthy way? So the creator accepts your uniqueness, yourself as you are, and your vulnerabilities, moves to taking adult responsibility for self by deciding and stating what you really want, problem solving and taking action, becomes your own rescuer. So before you secretly wanted to be rescued, now you become your own rescuer. Ask the right people for support. Ask the right people for support. People who were rejected often go back to people who will reject them, right? Ask the right people for support. If someone helps or you help yourself, keep agreements and commitments and follow through by taking action with a plan. Consistently makes decisions, solves problems, gets professional help, engages in self-help, positive self-talk, self-care, and gradual change. Focuses on positive outcomes and strengths, lets go of old thinking and tracks progress and benefits. Sees intermittent failures as a normal part of any process. Yes, my friends, you can, if you just decided to just focus on one of those, if you are feeling rejected and you just decided to focus on positive outcomes and strengths, let go of old thinking and tracks progress. See when I've not, leaned in, I'm going to be rejected. Know that failure is a part of any process. Know that people are going to let me down, and more people don't let me down. That would change everything. Where do you want to poke some holes in a story you've told yourself about how a thing should have gone and it didn't go that way? How do you want to support yourself now? I was talking to a friend and I was talking about some people in my community who I wasn't super fond of. Um, and I realized that it had been so long. And I said to myself, do I really care about this anymore? Like, does this really matter? Like, yeah, there were some things done, but like, does this affect my everyday? Does this affect how I'm feeling about myself? So you ask yourself that. Does the rejection that you felt affect your everyday? Or is it what's affecting you every day, your response, that is keeping you away from any potential rejection and keeping you isolated or to only what you know. So is it the original rejection that's really affecting you, or is it how you've adapted to the rejection that is affecting you? And do you still want to do that? Because you have choices, baby. There's that. Also, we know that we can look and say, what version of me? Was it my 20-year-old self that was looking at this? Like, I don't really see rejection in the same way. And another thing is, sometimes what we want to do is think about times we have rejected people, that it's actually okay that if our desires were not in that different direction, that we chose, instead of saying it was rejection, we chose another desire, and another person may have experienced that too. I mean, think about it this way. You're walking down the street in any country in the world, and people are selling you stuff, and they're asking, this happens to me in Harlem, y'all, my hair. Like it was even shorter than this. They'd be like, you want your hair braided? You want your hair braided? And I essentially said no to them. Do you think that they stopped asking people walking down the street? And I guarantee you, they asked enough people that there were folks that said, sure, and walked right in the shop. I'm sure that their efforts work, because there are times they are not standing on that street. They're in the shop braiding hair. I've actually never had braids in that way. I've braided my own hair. I've never had braids where hair was added. I love all types of braids. I love to see them. I just never have, because y'all, I don't got no edges. And for my white listeners, that's the side of your hair. Y'all seen enough TikTok white listeners to know that. But like, my beautician told me years ago, don't ever get braids. Look, listen to the story I'm telling myself, because it can pull your edges too tight and you ain't got none. Okay. That was an okay that was deserved. Y'all haven't got a. So there are times your desires have not aligned with someone who wants something from you. And we actually, if you told that story in the right place, people would say, oh, you made the right choice. Oh, you're empowered. Oh, I know that was hard, but you had to do what you had to do. So if you turn kind of rejection on its head and say, there are times where you have see, we're going to call it different words, asserted yourself, empowered yourself, stepped back, decided you want something different. So we call it a different word then now, right? keep in mind, keep in mind, this can be I'm talking about rejection today. This can be applied to anything that's ailing you. Asking yourself, is that really true? How old was I? What age was I looking at this? What lens, what filter was I looking at it? And poking holes in the story. But then the final thing I want to say is, so many of us carry stories of rejection based off of mom, dad, aunt, grandma, something an uncle said. I do not think that we have to always go around forgiving or apologizing. That works for me, but I think people should have a choice if that works for them. But I will say, as a human being, I know I do not show up my best every day. Sometimes when I've gone back to reevaluate those stories, which absolutely go back and reevaluate and look at those stories, even if it's just for me, look into the life of the person and realized maybe the uncle who's in active addiction, who's never around for Thanksgiving, should not be the one that I need to reflect back empowering things to me. Or maybe my mom, who has just been laid off from a job and is terrified and didn't grow up in a home where she could express her terror and is thinking about how I'm going to eat. Maybe that's not the person who can come and give me the support that I need. So sometimes we need to look what our caregivers were going through. And sometimes we have an opportunity to ask them or ask other people around us. I've had clients who've had parents who passed away, and they've been able to ask siblings and other folks around them, like, what did you think about this? And they've gotten some comfort. At the end of the day, if we feel rejected, the best way to handle that is continuing to seed ourselves, continuing to bring ourselves acceptance for any mistake, any way we show up. And sometimes when we do that, the way we show up reminds us to let go of that story that we didn't feel good about. Okay. Lots in the show notes today. I'm pretty sure there was a podcast. Oh, yes. People pleasing ain't pleasing you. We don't need approval. When we are, don't y'all love it when I keep coaching after I say, okay, like it's over? When we were children, we didn't just need approval. Like approval meant our survival. Like, I want this person to like me so I can get fed and clothed and have shelter and get some love. But as we become adults and we have our own agency and our own ability, then we can do that for ourselves. Thank you so much for joining me today. Again, if you want to know more, go to kimarrington.com/weight loss and get on my list, and you will get information about how to work with me. And also, don't forget, every Wednesday, there's a podcast waiting on you to help you change your life. Have a good one. It's been great to be with you today.
Are you feeling what you just heard? Good, good. Repeat after me. You don't have to figure it out on your own again anymore. I'm here to help. Head over to kimarrington.com and download my free video series dedicated to getting you feeling your best right now. Look around, there's some good stuff waiting on you. Got questions? Well, we're always talking on the socials, so find me on YouTube, Insta, and the book. Don't be shy, y'all. Go listen to another episode or join me here the same time next week. Finally, don't keep good shit to yourself. Share this with a homie that could use some help too. Remember, we're not lying to ourselves anymore. We're not lying to our doctors. And you damn sure don't lie to your life coach.